Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you a little tip on how to prevent concealer creasing under your eyes. Here you can see on the left hand side I've got some creasing from the concealer, and on the right side there's no creasing from the product. All that's visible are the natural lines from my skin. Both the powders I'm going to be talking about have a purpose for your face, but I want to make sure you're using them in the right way, and I'm going to show you a little experiment on my arm which I think you'll find interesting. When we set our concealer under our eyes, we tend to reach for a setting powder. One of the most popular ones is by Mercier. It is a fantastic powder. This is the translucent loose setting powder, and it really is great at setting makeup. However, it's not the one for underneath your eyes. One that you do want to apply underneath your eyes is the By Terry Hyaluronic Hydra-Powder, because this is a silica-based powder as opposed to a mineral one such as the Mercier powder. So when we look at the powders together, the Mercier one, which is on the left, is a little bit more talky, it's a little bit more chalky as opposed to the Hydra powder. They are both finely milled, but this one is a soft matte texture, whereas this one's like a silky velvety matte. You can see that the Hydra powder is a little bit more dense in the way it lays because it has got that silica to it. However, it is completely weightless. They both are very weightless. So starting with the By Terry Hydra Powder, I've taken this on a fluffy blending brush and I'm going to dust this onto my arm. I'm going to work it in just so you can really see how it lays on the skin. You can see how finely milled it is because of the dust coming up from it. This one is a little bit more visible on the arm, whereas the Mercier is almost completely invisible. Obviously when I'm using this on my face I don't use quite as much, so it doesn't leave this white cast. But I'm going to use the same amount of the Mercier translucent powder on the bristles so that you can compare them on the skin. This is more obvious in the bristles as opposed to the Hydra powder. Again, they are both finely milled. I feel like the Mercier one, because it's a bit more talky, is more obvious in the bristles. But you can see when it goes onto the arm, it is completely invisible. This is why it makes for a great face powder, but not necessarily great for under the eyes. So I'm going to use some eyeshadow to demonstrate why the Hyaluronic Hydra powder is good for under the eyes, but not necessarily on the face. Because the Hydra powder has the silica in it, you can see it almost repels the eyeshadow. And it has the same effect whether you're using a bronzer or a blush. So if you've applied the Hydra powder all over the face, and you find that the payoff is a bit wishy-washy, this will be why. You can see that it almost just repels it, whereas the translucent powder doesn't make a difference, it just holds it in place for longer. So the Hydra powder works really well underneath the eyes because it prevents the concealer from moving, but it doesn't work for the face because of this very reason. It just stops all of your colours being as vivid as they possibly can be. So the Hydra powder works for underneath the eyes, and the translucent powder by Mercier is better for the rest of the face. So let me demonstrate it underneath the eyes just so that you can see them both in action. I'm going to apply the Good Apple Concealer by KVD. I'm applying 2 shades because this one, as you can see, is a little bit warm. It's nice if you've got bluey tones underneath the eyes, or if you've got discoloration, because those peachy tones will help knock those colours back. But if you want brightness, then you can just use a slightly lighter shade. I'm mixing the two together today. So you can apply it however you like. I'm using a damp beauty blender to press that into the skin. I haven't done a review of this concealer, but I really like it. I had great expectations for it because I really fell in love with the Good Apple foundation. It gives really good coverage and it's not at all drying. It's quite hydrating and it just doesn't migrate. Once I've applied it and blended it in, I like to use my fingers to kind of almost mop up any excess product. I always do this step to prevent excessive creasing. I find the warmth from your fingers helps to really blend the product in and it gives it a much more natural feel. I'm just popping a little bit of the translucent powder by Mercier onto the forehead to mattify, and as you can see it really is invisible and it does mattify so well. I really love this powder for the face. I just don't love it for underneath the eyes. I also think if it was really meant to be for underneath the eyes, I don't think Mercier would have come out with a secret brightening under eye powder specifically for that area. So I always like to leave it to settle for a little while, give it a good 5 minutes to warm up, and then you use a cotton bud just to remove the excess build up, and then that's where you've got less product but you're not removing it from all around the eyes. You're just removing the excess product in the areas that it creases. So first off, I'm going to take the By Terry Hyaluronic Hydra Powder, and I like to apply this with my fingers, but today I'm going to use a brush. I find that when I use my fingers I get less of a white cast, but you will see here it doesn't give a white cast like it did on the arm. It gives a very nice smoothing effect and a blurring effect because of the silicas, and it prevents it from moving. It also becomes almost like waterproof, and for me it is my favourite powder for underneath the eyes. Remember, before you do the entire eye with a powder, do either the bottom or the top first to make sure you've removed any of the creasing, because normally when you look down you'll get a little bit more, or if you look up you'll get a little bit more. So make sure you've moved it before you set it in place. On the opposite eye, I'm going to apply some of the Mercier translucent powder. So again, I'm making sure to remove any of the creasing before setting it in place. I'm starting with the bottom, looking upwards to stretch the skin and using a patting motion to press it in place so I don't disturb any of the remaining concealer. So even just here, looking at the underneath of the eyes on the left and the left eye has definitely got a little bit more texture to it, and again I think that's because it is slightly more talky. But at this stage it will set the concealer in place, it just won't hold as long. So that's why you end up with creasing with the Mercier translucent powder as opposed to the Hydra-Powder, which just holds it in place all day long. So if we jump forward a few hours, you can see already on the left eye I'm getting some very obvious creasing, whereas if you look at the right eye, there is no creasing of the product, it's just the skin itself. So I hope that explains about using the right powders for the right area. The translucent powder by Mercier is great for the face, and the By Terry Hydra Powder definitely works better underneath the eyes. I do use the By Terry Hydra Powder down the centre of the face because I don't tend to put any other products there. I just avoid it anywhere I'm applying a colour because I don't want it to have a wishy-washy payoff. Please give the tutorial a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. It really does help push it through the algorithm. All the products I've used will be listed and linked in the description bar below. Come follow me outside of YouTube over on Instagram, and I will see you next week. Bye guys.